I rise today to defend the people and places we love in Ontario, to stand up for our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. We are already feeling the effects of climate change, and the crisis will only get worse. Bill 4 puts the final nail in the coffin of Ontario's climate change plans. And I want to be clear, with all due respect to my Liberal colleagues, the previous government's climate plan was flawed, but at least it had a plan. What has the Ford government delivered on climate change? No plan. An additional $3 billion budget to our budget deficit. A complete waste of taxpayer dollars on a politically motivated lawsuit against the federal government that has no hope of winning. An employment program for lawyers to defend this province from lawsuits from companies holding assets that are now worthless. A closed for business sign to the fastest growing sector of the global economy, the clean economy. Ripped up contracts that even has the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and the Business Council of Canada criticizing this government for its anti-business agenda. The Premier's irresponsible actions hurts Ontario's economy, environment, and our communities. But most importantly, it puts people's lives, livelihoods, and way of life at risk. I'm going to put this in terms that maybe this government will understand. Climate change is nature's tax on everything, and it's costing us big time. According to the Environment Commissioner of Ontario, in the first 6 months of this year alone, extreme weather events due to climate change is costing every Ontarian over $350. So let's be clear about that. That's putting us on pace of climate change costing us over $700 this year alone per person. Flooded basements, roofs blown off, infrastructure destroyed, ice damage, forest fires, crop losses. It all adds up. And according to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, in the first 6 months of this year alone, $1 billion in insurable losses due to climate change. The cost of disaster relief in this country, in one generation has gone from a few $1 million a year now to billions of dollars every year. And let's be clear, scientists frankly don't agree on much. But the one thing they do agree on is that the damage we're facing today is the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to face in the next 12 years if we don't push the trajectory of pollution down by 2020, which is a year away, Mr. Speaker. The damage will escalate, the costs will balloon out of control, and let's be clear, no government can call itself fiscally responsible unless it takes action to prevent these costs. No business would fail to protect itself from such extreme risk. No government that is for the people would fail to defend the people in places we love in Ontario. But that is exactly what the Ford government is doing by getting rid of Ontario's climate plan with having no plan to replace it. But, Mr. Speaker, the numbers tell one story, the people of Ontario tell another story. Last night, 12 hours ago, I put out an email asking people, what would you want to tell the Premier? And I've received almost 2,000 responses in less than 12 hours. And I want to share a few of them with you. Anne from Toronto says, we know how to mitigate climate change. Respect the knowledge of Nobel laureates, of scientists, of economists, of ordinary people by taking responsibility. Business will not thrive in the uncertainty of climate change. Business will not thrive as the climate crisis destroys vital infrastructure. The future, jobs, and healthy people is in alternative energy. We urge you to turn to the future now, not to the past, to turn toward the people of Ontario rather than looking away. John from London asked me to say, doing nothing will only hurt our children and grandchildren. Plus, tell them that this generation was too lazy to do the right thing. I value doing the right thing far more than a few pennies at the pump. Brownwin from my riding in Guelph wrote, Mr. Ford, I would like you to think twice about passing Bill 4, which will cancel pollution pricing and erase emission targets. I work in the conservation field and see firsthand the increasing effects of climate change here in Ontario. I'm not talking about weather, I'm talking about longer-term trends such as flooding and extreme heat that is very worrying. I have kids, and the situation for them when they grow up will be much more dire. I'm worried about their future and the future of all Ontarians, indeed people all over the world, when it comes to this issue. I would like to be proud of my province and the role we could play in addressing climate change issue head-on. Natasha from Brampton wrote, I have a small child, a baby on the way, and hopefully grandchildren in my future. I want them all to have fresh air, clean water, green space, and a safe, healthy environment to thrive and flourish. Unfortunately, with all the green initiatives that have been targeted, I fear something close to a post-apocalyptic wasteland seen only in movies becoming a reality sooner rather than later. Right now, I worry that this planet won't survive my lifetime, let alone my children or grandchildren. I'm saddened and disappointed by your actions, Mr. Ford, and ask that you put aside whatever environment agenda you seem to have and try to think about the big picture long term. And finally, I just want to share what Margaret from Toronto had to say. Premier Ford, I'm 81 years old, and what happens in the next few years won't make much difference to me. But my children and my grandchildren will have to live with the consequences of shutting our eyes to what is happening. To avert the disaster that is barreling down on us, we need to take action to cut down drastically on pollution, and we need to do it now. I just hope that it isn't already too late. So, Mr. Speaker, once upon a time, there was a Conservative Party that believed that markets could solve problems. They either don't today, or they are playing politics with the biggest crisis we have ever faced. All pollution pricing is a market mechanism to send the right signals to businesses and people to reduce pollution. That's what Nobel Prize-winning economists tell us, but the Premier calls it a tax grab. How is it a tax grab if you return the money back to the people of Ontario through a carbon dividend? As a matter of fact, the best way to help hardworking, low-income and modest and middle-income Ontarians is to put a price on pollution and return the money back to them as a carbon dividend. The FAO says this. Even Conservative policy analysts like Mark Cameron say this. It shows how people can have more money in their pocket. The Premier says pollution pricing kills jobs. Well, the 5 best provinces in Canada with the 5 best economies have a price on pollution. The 10 best states in the U.S. performing economically have a price on pollution. The European countries performing economically well have a price on pollution. Why? It drives efficiency, innovation, and job creation in the fast-growing clean economy. But this Premier wants to throw it away. The Premier says pollution pricing won't work. Well, British Columbia brought in a pollution price, dropped their emissions almost immediately by 16%, and they had one of the best performing economies in Canada. The state of California has already met their emission targets ahead of schedule and has one of the best performing economies in the world right now. Mr. Speaker, pollution pricing works. We know it's only one tool. There are other tools. We're going to have to electrify our transportation system. We're going to have to build out public transit. We're going to have to help people transition to electric vehicles. We know that we're going to have to retrofit buildings to help people save money by saving energy. But here's the bottom line. Bill 4 sends the wrong signal. It tells the people of Ontario and it tells the world that Ontario is closed for business in the clean economy and that Ontario is not doing its fair share to solve the biggest crisis we face. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Further debate.